And Sunny, can you do a roll call?
Acting Chair Holmquist.
Here.
Mr. Dorschel.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Here.
Mr. Hamburg.
Here.
Ms. Thomas.
All right. Item 3 is approval of minutes from April 10th, 2017. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Second.
All right. Take your pick. And the addition, deletions, or corrections? Chris?
Page 3, we did ask condition 10 that the setback from Monona Drive should be increased to 20 feet.
Oh, yes.
And the next item under findings of fact, the way yours was written originally, Sonia, we inserted the part about we had asked them to move it closer to the street so the west elevation to direct customers the main entrance of the building, but the part of yours that was actually missing now, which also said, and the signage is within the limits for the maximum square footage of a commercial sign district. That was important to have, part to have in there. And then on page 4, the condition of approval, the second condition was a minor increase in size of the logo on the brick facade while removing the second logo, as discussed, may be approved. If you remember, what we talked about is if they removed that smaller logo by Summit, then you could allow them to increase the size of the other logo on the brick. But it wasn't increase it and keep the other one.
Okay.
All right. Any additional edits? Seeing none? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Minutes are approved. And appearances. Are there any individuals that would like to appear on an item that is not on the agenda? We'll take those first, and then we'll try to take the items that are connected to an agenda item when we take that agenda item up, so that way it can connect. All right. If the commission's okay with it, I'd like to take an item out of order, since we have a variety of folks that are here to appear about an item that is down on 6C and 6D. And if we could take that item out of order, that'd be appreciated.
No, we just went to the public hearing.
Okay. All right. So we'll start with 6C, which is a public hearing on the request by Eric Lang, business owner, and Dwayne Hendrickson, property owner, for approval of a zoning permit for a new use as a retail store, Ignite Glass and Gifts, in a new tenant space at 6009B Monona Drive. And are the applicants here? If you'd like to come up and give us a brief description of what it is that you're asking for here tonight, and then we'll offer it up for appearances.
I believe the property owner's broker is here as well. Is that correct?
I don't see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Since it was scheduled for later, it's possible.
Sorry.
Since it was scheduled for later originally, should we be concerned that it might be coming later?
All right. If you could just tell us who you are and what it is that you're here seeking for.
My name is Eric Lang. I own Ignite Glass and Gifts, a smoke shop located on the west side of Madison on Odana Road, and was hoping to open a second location at the address in question, opening June 1st. And what else would you like to know?
Overview of the business, what you sell, your impacts on parking, hours of operation.
Okay, we sell a variety of different smoking accessories, tobacco products, hookahs, shisha, incense, tapestries. We average about 3 customers per hour, the height of our business being around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And our hours of operation would be from noon to 8 p.m.
If you're fine staying up there, either that or you can join in, and we'll go through the folks that are registered, and there are some folks that want to speak.
Okay.
So I try to keep them in the order in which I received them here. The first one is Bert Slindy from 914 Progressive Lane would like to speak against as well as register against.
I'm actually here in addition to represent the Water Tower Plaza Condominium Association. The owners are not in favor of this. I also personally felt a little misled by this when I got it in the mail. It said that there was going to be an Ignite glass and gift shop, and I thought, oh, cool, little glass blowing shop and gift shop. That's great. Someone contacted me and said, what do you think about this new business that's going to open? I said, I think it's wonderful. He said, do you realize it's a head shop? No. They sell all sorts of accessories from cigarettes to tobacco products to pot pipes to accessories to lighters and butane and rolling papers, and just go to their website. So I did, and I realized that we already have a vape shop 2 doors away, and I just felt that this was the wrong message to be sending in terms of attracting and maintaining quality retail. So I feel that this need has already been serviced by the existing business 2 doors away. And to have a second shop makes no sense to me. So that's my thought.
Second item I have is from Timothy McGullen from 2109 Lake Point Drive, number 2, and like to speak against.
Excuse me if I seem a little bit nervous. This is my first time speaking, other than like college and stuff like that. So I apologize. All right, you guys look like a friendly bunch. So anyway, let me get to the chase here. I found out about this probably 2 or 3 days ago. Supposedly a letter was supposed to be sent to all the owners around. I actually represent Big Boy Vapes. We've been in your guys' community for 6 months. We sell vaporizers. There are a few glass products that are in there, but over 95% or so of stuff that's in there is all vape, smoking cessation aids, and stuff like that. I have to admit I was upset hearing this go on. The main reason, not just because of my livelihood and stuff like that, but the whole parking aspect. Dwayne Hendrickson, when we moved in 6 months ago, said that parking was fine. We have lost sales. I have customers coming in at least once or twice a week saying that they either came later or didn't come that day because you've got 2 buffets, a grocery store, a taco stand, and an animal clinic all trying to share spaces that are, I think, about under 50 spaces. You guys probably know how many parking spaces are there. This isn't just lunchtime. It's not just dinner. There's quinceañeras. There's different parties that go on Friday, Saturday nights. I'm open 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and the traffic is horrendous. The parking is just not there. And the issue that I have is with my landlord that rented to us saying that there was all this parking. Now he's gone and cut the pet clinic in half, made it into a shop front, and now all this parking's supposed to fit there too. There's accidents there almost every single day because of the people that drive in and out of there. So that's basically it. That besides the fact that we sell some of the same stuff that they might. We don't sell butane lighters. We don't sell rolling papers. We don't sell any of that stuff. With that said, I mean, that's basically all I have. Is my issue is the parking there. There already isn't enough for the people that are there. And I've been there for 6 months to see it and seen my business decline because of it. So thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you. All right, next we have Ryan Patterson, 6,000 Monona Drive. Would like to register against the zoning permit for Ignite Glass and Gifts. After that, we have Jerry Hermanson, 1818 Dover Road in Madison. Would like to speak against and register against. And Jerry.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Hermanson, and I own Capital City Coins and Jewelry on Monona Drive, which would be right next to this establishment that's going to open. a friend of mine is considering opening a fresh seafood establishment in the same location. And I don't need a bong. I don't need any accessories. I don't use drugs. I do like crab legs, and I like seafood. And parking is a problem, even at my store, where I'm in the same building as Tan Spa Studio Z. And when another establishment, hair salon, had a problem, the owner of our building hired approximately 15 of their employees, which basically doubled our parking area. And even with the limited space that we have, it's very difficult to find a place to park on any given Friday afternoon when all these ladies are getting their hair done. It's a real hassle because I don't have any designated parking for my store. And even the people in the strip mall next to us, I find people parking there and walking over to the Mexican grocery store, other establishments in the strip mall next to us, and it's a real detriment to my business. And I just would rather not see this happen. And that's all I have to say.
Jerry, and last, unless there's someone else that's here to speak, make sure you fill out a piece of paper, is Mark Hermanson, 6025 Monona Drive, would like to register and speak against Ignite Glass and Gifts.
Co-owner of the business, I don't speak.
Okay, so we'll change that just to register. All right, is there anybody else here that would like to speak or register on this item? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing, so 6C, and move on to 6D, which is the consideration of action on the request by Eric Lang, business owner, and Dwayne Hendrickson, property owner, for the approval of a zoning permit for new use as a retail store, Ignite Glass and Gifts, in a new tenant space at 6009B Monona Drive. And Sunny, will you start us off with what you
The zoning
have?
permit for this use is required. It's a new use in a new space in the building. I have contacted other city department heads, including police chief, fire chief, and city clerk. There were no concerns from the police chief and fire chief that they wanted to add into the recommended conditions of approval. There was one additional item from the city clerk that, if approved, all required local and state licenses for cigarette and tobacco products shall be obtained. I did recommend approval based on the information submitted in the packets on the parking counts and the availability during certain hours.
All right. Sorry, is it business, Eric? Do you want to join us up in case there are questions? Sure. Thank you. And then we can open it up to committee members. Any questions or concerns?
Well, I
Chap-
know parking is an issue in this area, big issue. Regardless of which business goes in there, there's a right for that owner to have use of that property. And it seems to me, of all the uses that go in there, personally, I would prefer seafood too. I would probably use that, but it's not up to me what goes in there. And a seafood shop would probably use just as much parking as this shop. If this were a use that used more parking than would be adequate for the square footage they're renting, I would say it's something we could talk about. But we have a building that we've approved to be in there, and everybody gets to share that parking. So I think, as much as I understand the parking issue, I think it's a real hard one to not allow any applicant in because of that. And as far as duplication of services, I don't think we regulate services unless there's a gross duplication of services.
Kathy?
I want to know from the planner what is an allowable basis. From a community standard, it's not a business I would choose. So if I was trying to attract businesses to Monona that met the interests of the community, it's not a business that I would do. So I agree with Chris on the parking, that I think, because something may go in there. The question is the use.
Sure. And I think, could you put up your microphone, please, just because we're recording? So in the zoning code, there's not a list of permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses. And so instead, in Monona, with our performance zoning, we have to review it based on the characteristics of the use. And that means things like, are they emitting odors and noise? Is there a parking hazard? Is it incompatible with adjacent uses or the surrounding land uses, like the residential behind it? Is it a safety concern? And those sorts of things. We can't decide one business or another just based on preference. It has to be
I
based on
believe
those.
it's incompatible.
Susan?
I had a question. It says that you make some of the products, the pendants and I don't know, the glass.
I do, yeah. I've
So-
been blowing glass for
So
20
is that,
years now.
where is that done? Not on this site? Or?
It's not done on this site. I have a little shop space in my store over on Odana Road, and I also have a shop at my property.
Okay. So it really is just retail, it's not?
It is. I had considered maybe in the future doing something on the lines of classes and whatnot, but that wouldn't happen for at least 3 years. So
And if that happened, would there be any requirement to come back? I mean, in terms of glass blowing, I don't know what kind of,
I would definitely speak to the fire chief. I've dealt with fire codes many times in the past, in 20 years of working with fire, you kind of have to. So if it would work out, it would work out. If it wouldn't, it wouldn't. It's not that big of a deal. So I wouldn't be blowing glass at this location right away.
I would recommend that we add that as a condition for
That it
if
come
the use
back,
changes,
yeah,
that
yeah, okay.
it be approved by the fire chief or return to planning commission.
Good.
Well, I think I'm in agreement with Chris on this. This might not be my first choice either for the type of retail establishment, but I don't think it's prohibited, and I agree that this requires a minimal amount of parking compared to some other businesses that might go in
Do
there.
we get to choose?
And for that reason, I guess I don't think that the Plan Commission can really pass judgment on the respective merits of a seafood place versus this type of establishment.
Rob?
I tend to agree with a lot of what's said. I think it's unfortunate the nature of the business being 2 doors down from a similar business, but in the parking, I want to see something in that space, and this seems to take about as little parking as you could ask for a retail business to take up.
Excuse me, could you move your microphones a little closer?
Yeah. As far as the use of the space and what can fit in there for parking, what's for 750 square feet of space, I think it's, as far as parking goes, it's going to have as minimal effect on the property as one could ask for. So,
Kathy?
I want to go back to the use about the number of uses. When there is one 2 doors down, there's another e-shop on Monona Drive. Several years ago, there was a CVS store that wanted to go on the corner of Monona Drive, on Frost Woods and Monona Drive. And we turned them down because we thought we had enough drugstores on the drive. And it stood. Now, why we would need in this city 3 e-shops within 4 blocks of each other, I don't know. But that's not what I want to turn Monona Drive into. So for that reason, it would be at least the 3rd one, and maybe more. and I think that's too much on the drive.
Rob?
I would look at the hair salons on Monona Drive, and just between Nichols and Broadway, there's, I think, 7 I counted, or something like that, between spa and similar business types. That was a while ago, and I was just walking to get groceries, but there is a heavy presence of a salon, and although I think it's a more attractive business on Monona Drive, it's an example of similar.
I agree with you a lot.
May I say something?
Yeah.
So just to clear things up, we decided before we even looked into this spot, because Big Boy Vapes is 2 doors down, that we would not be selling any of our e-cig products at this location. We're not looking to compete with anybody on Monona Drive. It would be more of a glass gallery, incense tapestries and whatnot. Just so that's clear.
So I had some similar initial kind of reactions of, boy, this is duplicated, and then continue to kind of go back to what's the role of Plan Commission when it comes to zoning permit. And although there are pieces around compatibility, I think the main concern here has to do with parking. And I tend to agree with the majority of the members here that parking is a tough thing in this lot. We know it, and it's a tough thing depending on not just the time of day, but the event that's going on, which clearly folks that are nearby there, they know that, where although the numbers might say one thing, and there's a particular event, and all of a sudden there's a lot more cars there, and that's a great thing to see. So I think parking is our main concern. When it came to compatibility and safety concerns, I actually reviewed the number of calls to the store on the west side of town, and I was reassured by the lack of calls for police calls to that location, as well as the near vicinity of that location, from a safety standpoint, about calls to shops for either theft or other disturbances. And I think that's another piece when I look at compatibility, particularly around safety in the community aspect, as well as being adjacent to the residential places right behind this business. So, is there a motion from the commission? Chris?
Move approval, conditions recommended by staff, and condition 3, that expansion of this use would require additional approvals from the Plan Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Sonny?
Could I add the other condition about compliance with all required local and state licenses for tobacco and cigarette sales?
Well, it says all local and state building permits, so you mean
Fire
what?
code.
Building permits, fire codes, and then anything required by
Yep.
tobacco
Yep.
sales.
All right, and does the second agree to that, I assume?
I do.
Chris?
I added that expansion. If you started teaching classes there, that would bring a lot of people in at one time. That's something we would have to have a very serious discussion about, whether or not the site can handle it. And
Agreed.
that would affect the businesses around you. So that's one thing that we'd have to look at. We'd have to look at any fire codes, et cetera, if you were trying to start blowing glass back there.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I put it in, that has to come back to Planning Commission, because that would be a different business than what one we're looking at tonight.
Okay.
And for all the people that showed up, I thank you for coming, because we very seldom get people that are engaged. We rarely get people coming here to look at some of the things we do. We do a lot here, a lot of things that really affect our area. And we really appreciate your opinions and coming here. You feel a little dejected, I'm sure, right now, because you don't like to see this particular use. I mean, no offense, it's something I would probably go to the seafood shop more myself.
Gotcha.
But we can't choose that. We can't start telling people what business they can have and what business they can run, as long as it fits our ordinances and our city, and it's not an extraordinary duplication of services. It's hard to sit up here and have another small business person that wants to operate and tell them, well, we don't like you, we like that one, but we don't like this one. That's a very condemning thing to start doing to businesses. So it's very hard for us to come up here tonight and say, although we might be sitting there with you, it's hard for us to say it's not allowable in our city. And we hope you'll be a great business and you bring some more people in and they'll shop at other stores in your center. And hopefully
I'm
this will be a
imagining
great
that will
addition to
definitely
Monona.
happen.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, and the ayes have it, and we will follow up from there. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
We will go back to item 5A, which is a public hearing on the request by Galloway Companies for approval of a GDP, Yarhara Commons, for redevelopment area number 9 at 802 and 900 West Broadway, 6320 and 6321 Metropolitan Lane, and 6406, 6416, and 6418 Bridge Road for a mixed-use development, including approximately 233 residential units, 26,000 square feet of commercial space, 33,000 square feet of office space, and a public park. And we're here for public hearing section first. I'm not sure if Steve wants to give an overview.
Someone from the development team come up and
And just to refresh, in your packets, both items indicate that they're both for 6A and B. One is for 5A and B, and the other is for 6A and B. I'm sure you figured it out by now, but it took me a minute.
Hello.
All right.
I don't know which one of these is working. I guess both of them, or?
We'll watch YouTube later to find out.
Okay. How's that? All right, so I think I know most everybody up here. I'm Steve Dorn. We have quite a few people with us tonight, who I believe you met last time. Adam from JLA Architects, my partner in the project, Aaron Kostichka, who also owns McGann Construction. We have somebody from Ken Psyche, Jeff Steen. Sorry, I just met Jeff tonight. And Joe Doyle, who is our civil with Veerbecker. Where is this presenting? Okay. So I apologize, I wasn't here last time, but I did get a chance to sit down with the group afterwards and understand not only the support we got from everybody for the project, but also a better understanding of some of the concerns and the requested changes to the project. So I think what our plan is here tonight is I'm going to let Adam walk through, just give a quick summary of where things are, and then me and Aaron will probably interject and jump in and talk about certain issues that we've revised and adjusted since the last time we presented.
Sounds
okay?
good.
So, yep.
Hi.
Bye.
So we're all familiar with the location. If there's anyone in the room that isn't, we're triangle bound by Hare River, Bridge Road, and Broadway. There are 6 buildings that will be demolished in preparation for this project. The remaining buildings that we won't be touching: Monona State Bank, the pump building up on the corner in Broadway, the yacht club. The rest of the site will be completely cleared. So for phase 1, this is a 8.5 acre development taken down in 3 phases. As you can see on the screen, phase 1 being mixed-use building that fronts on the Hare River as well as the new public plaza. Second phase would be a residential apartment building fronting on Bridge Road. And the third phase is intended to be an office building in between Monona State Bank and the new mixed-use building. As part of phase 1, the city will be responsible for demolition and clearing of the development parcel, construct lower Metropolitan Lane, which is what we're calling the bottom portion of the road that currently is upper Metropolitan Lane and dies into some of the other parcels. The intersection with Broadway, we've got a new curb cut. Are you able to see that moving? Yep. Okay. Here.
We're also working with the county about a mountable fire curb here for a fire access lane on this building. And then also in phase 1, you've got water, sanitary, electric beneath lower metropolitan lane, as well as the storm sewer facility in the public park. The development team, the phase 1 building is a 5-story mixed-use building, 96 residential units, about 28,000 square feet of commercial space on a 3,000 square foot public park building that the city will lease back. There'll be some public restrooms and a potential multi-purpose room for skate rental or whatever the city deems useful for whatever's happening at the site. Parking is below the footprint of the building as well as the surface lot. There's 178 indoor stalls currently and 88 surface stalls. That actually is 102 currently. So these numbers are shifting around a little bit as we develop. We'll get more to that later. Phase 2. Phase 2, the city will be responsible for Upper Metropolitan Lane, bury the overhead electrical services on Upper Metropolitan Lane, construct a roadway between Lower Metropolitan and Bridge. This is the connector street between phase 2 and 3. And then all necessary water, sanitary, storm, and electrical. The phase 2 building consists of approximately 135 to 160 residential apartments. We're looking at a mix of 25% studio, 48 one bedroom, 27 two. The footprint of the parking is below that entire site as well, so it's not just below the building, but also below some green roof areas. Walk-ups along Bridge Road and potentially on the connector road. Said green roof spaces that some of the units will walk out onto, but you look out from those courtyard, I'll call them, units onto a green roof, and that connects up visually with the park. There'll be a club room on the lower level to try to get some activity at that, on the private sector side of things, but it's right down on Upper Metropolitan Lane. Phase 3, it's a 3-story office building, 11,000 square foot footprints. Central core and lobby, we're looking at potentially a single user is the desired occupant. 30 stalls, excuse me, below the footprint of the building, and an additional 85 surface spaces. That said, I'm going to kind of get into one of the topics that there was a lot of discussion on last time with the parking. To summarize by phase first. Phase 1, like I said, we're at 178 interior stalls, 102 surface. When you look at the zoning codes for Monona, I've got a required column there which says required ratios. Comes up 146 for the residential. What we were using as a target is more industry standard for these types of buildings, which is a 1 stall per bedroom, which is a little bit light from Monona standards. For the restaurant, the target for the code was 1 per 3 seats. There's 2 ways to skin it, but we were counting that as 1 stall per, or 8 stalls per 1,000 square feet. Office, 3 stalls per 1,000 square feet. Retail, 3 stalls per 1,000 square feet. So when you see the comparison between the two in the lower right of that chart, we've got 280 provided and 341 required. So I'm going to just move on to the next 2 phases, and there's a summary where we talk about shared parking. Phase 2, a little more straightforward. It's all covered parking. It's all private. 178 stalls that would all be residential. Phase 3, and again, on the ratio there between the interior and the additional street parking that would be adjacent and constructed as part of Phase 2, you can see that we have a surplus. We've got 241 provided and 207 required by Monona zoning. Phase 3, again, with the ratio that we were designing to is typical for an office such as this. 3 per 1,000 is pretty adequate. So we're at a total of 132 stalls, 112 required by Monona zoning. Now this chart at the bottom, I'm going to try to zoom it in a little bit so people can see it. You guys all have a copy.
That third phase has an ability to expand that parking underneath if we make that building a little larger too, which changes that site quite a bit.
I think that might be about as good as it gets. Is it legible back there? Yeah, okay. So this analysis is a tool we use to look at different times of day and when the peak parking requirements are happening for different spaces. Across the top, you've got the residential apartment units. This is all lumped together in the development as a whole. We're counting that as 100% all the time just because most of those stalls are going to be behind private secure doors. So we're kind of taking the residential count out of the mix for this analysis. Restaurants, we are at a total, or target count of 118. And then as you move along, you see the weekend category, 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., 7 to 6, 6 to 2. So your peak time, of course, for a restaurant being the evening, 6 p.m. to 2, it's at 100%, whereas, you know, from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., 10%. There's some cars left overnight. That's the general strategy of this office and business. Obviously, it's going to be heaviest during business hours, and evenings and weekends is going to be available for park usage. So when you look at the totals of that summary, we provided throughout the whole development 653 stalls, and these at the bottom of the columns where it says count, that's where you see that the total peak for that selected time of day. You can see the closest we get would be weekends weekdays from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., 434. So what this tells me is that we've got enough parking when the development is complete to serve this, as still provide some additional parking for park events and park users. I think that there's also the potential of parallel parking along Bridge Road that's not part of these counts that could significantly help. You guys have anything to add?
Parking is something we spent a lot of time on in this project because, I mean, frankly, from a retail standpoint, it's not leasable if we don't feel like we have enough parking. And so we'll be monitoring pretty closely how much food we put in this building. We are, the first phase is on the first floor is about 26-ish thousand square feet of commercial on that first floor. We're going to be ourselves putting about 5,000 square feet of office space in there, which is a good co-tenant for a project like this to share parking with other restaurant and retail use, because at the restaurants peak times we're not there, and so we feel like we're a good shared parking user. So if you look at kind of right now in our analysis, we have about, our parking works with up to 13,500 square feet of restaurant space, which is probably half the building. From a practical standpoint, one of those restaurants may be a sit-down restaurant with lunch and dinner and a bar like a Waypoint. Another one could be more like a Weeks or a Crema Cafe, where we're going to be really watching to make sure that we don't put 3 restaurants in there at 13,000 square feet that are all there at dinner time. If we do more than one restaurant, it will end up being restaurants that are peaking at different times, so that we're not causing parking issues. The worst thing that would happen to us is us to put a bunch of retailers in there that couldn't park, and they'd fail, and then we'd have a bunch of turnover long term, and we wouldn't be full. So that is one thing that we have been working very hard on, because we want to make sure there's more than enough adequate parking for our users.
Can I ask a clarifying question
Sure.
for a second? Under your target counts of 546, that's using the unit of measurement that is the standard that you guys were speccing into, right?
Yeah, so it's using the numbers that we were designing to. The city of Monona zoning code were listed there. As you know, as things balance out, we wanted to see how it would check against code at the end of the day, as knowing that some of them are going to be a little bit different than others.
Well, and that's where I was going, because when I add up even the city requirements, I get a total of 660,
Okay.
which we're talking 7 stalls compared to what's provided.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, the yacht club doesn't uses other people's parking spaces.
Right.
Sorry, what? Oh, so we can't ask them?
No, we'll save that for the next step. Sorry, I was making sure that I understood this. We'll continue with this part, and then we'll get into some dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, your point's well taken. I mean, we are close. And we also hope that this becomes a place, some sort of sense of place in Monona, and people walk here and bike here. I mean, we're really close to the bike path, and there's not another stop on this entire side of the lake. And so we are going to do whatever we can to encourage people to, use alternative modes of transportation as well. Flip side of that is we are realists. We understand that people are going to drive their cars, and we do want to make sure there's enough parking.
All right. Okay. Moving on a little bit about public transit bike path. This is pretty well connected to a few bus stops nearby. There's 3 locations, and of course the bike path currently comes to Bridge Road, and one of the design goals of this development is to bring that bike path to this new public plaza as a southern destination for this area. So I think it's important that bike traffic is routed through the development. Moving on to 5.0 design standards. This gets into stormwater management, and I don't know if it's okay, but Joe Doyle is going to talk to that a little bit. Sonia, is that all right, or does he need to register? They have there, and then the diagram, and your plan is at the tail end if you want to pull that up.
Joe Doyle with Beer Becker. The site generally, as it exists today, is mostly impervious surfaces such as pavement and gravel areas that are currently draining untreated towards the Yahara River. The proposed site, on the other hand, will have more landscaped areas, more green spaces where the stormwater will have availability to filter into the ground and be treated. On top of that, there will also be situations where we'll have underground systems with giant sumps in them to clean the stormwater to meet all the city, state, county requirements before it's discharged into the Yahara River. In general, you're going to have a better situation than what currently exists for the site for stormwater.
This next portion is a lot about the character of land use, green space, common amenities. As this has been this is the second time at Plan Commission, but the city has been looking at this for quite a while. So I won't go through the whole list, but the goal is, of course, for this public plaza to be all sorts of cool stuff. I think that people want it to function in a whole lot of capacities, and whatever shakes out in the design of the park, I think there's a lot of further discussion that's going to happen there. But it is this park space or plaza space is central to the scheme. The master plan organization of this site is creating this sense of space, both in what happens in the park and what happens adjacent to the park. So as important to what happens in the park is the context and the backdrop for the architecture around the space and the uses around the space. So of course, we talked a little bit about the bike path. There's adjacent public transit. You've got the Yahara River, of course, and all that comes with the amenities of connection to Madison's water system. So we'll have access to the river, obviously, direct adjacency to the Monona Wetland Conservancy. And there's permanent visibility because of that too, from the Beltline as well as Bridge Road. So I think that there's always going to be a presence on Bridge, and from a higher volume traffic along the Beltline as well. So the main entrance of the development is going to be from Broadway on our new curb cut, and that will draw you directly past the first two buildings into the park. So, the other critical thing I mentioned of a successful public place is the surrounding buildings and how they define edges. So the architecture for all three phases is intended to support that position of buildings and fenestration, how the buildings meet the ground. Phase one, I think maybe since we're doing PIP as well, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the details of phase one during that portion of the presentation. Phase two, this was a comment at the last meeting as well. I can zoom in.
We put a lot of time into the phase two architecture and how it fronts Bridge Road, because one of our concerns was driving down Bridge Road, we want this thing to feel massive. We want it to feel like it's part of the place and it fits in. So I think this picture does a pretty good job of showing how Adam really broke that building up. So as you're driving, down Bridge Road, you don't feel like you're driving into this massive structure. You have a nice building with walk-ups along Bridge Road. It's inviting. It matches the feel of the rest of the development, and has several different steps in that facade as you're driving along Bridge Road. So, we're hoping you feel the same way, but we feel that it really makes it for a much more inviting building facing that road. It's not an easy task to make a big building look small, but we feel like we've done a pretty good job with it here.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think there's some good opportunities to potentially drop a few units off the top floor to get, the roof line to a little variation in the roof line. There's some potential for occupiable roof spaces up there too, which you see railing and people. It's another way to further push this idea of engagement of the plaza on a lot of different elevations and levels. And these residential buildings have balconies and green roofs and plazas, and from the park space, I should stop calling it a park, right? From the plaza, you've got the green roof space on the back of the B building that is up 11 feet from the park. So, that's a fairly large terrace space. Directly in front of it, we'll show you some other ideas in a minute, but and then flanking the two legs, I'll call them, of this building are additional green roof spaces, which would be totally private, but, just giving a sense of lots of different levels of people, potentially people being out enjoying the space.
One of the things we realized, early on when we were planning this building is there's a lot of units to bring on into Monona. And so, we worry about that because we're the ones signed on the dotted line for these loans. And so, for us, it's not just a matter of putting as many units on the site as we can. We want to bring quality units. So not only are they leasable, but they're places people want to live for the long term.
Our phase three standalone commercial office building. It's inherently different from the first two. You don't have a lot of relief from balconies, so it will have more of a corporate feel to it. I think the massing and the building position on the site reinforces the edge along the park, and we have some additional images we can look at about that placement. But it also is a balance of how much parking we can get to support that space. We looked at the building in different positions and what that did to the parking count. Certainly the one that we are proposing is the best solution, has the best ratios. And architecturally, we're trying to pick up on some rhythms of the A building and color schemes, material palette, so that it all feels like a cohesive design approach to these buildings that will define the edges of this public space.
Should we talk about the placement since we're here? Do you have that?
Sure. That was kind of the next slide.
Okay.
Hard to see on this. If you'd like, I can pull up some larger images. Maybe it's best to just wait till the question portion of that.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess now's a good time to do it. That's basically the end. We've got some economic feasibility and impact. If there are questions about that, we can address them. Schedule, and then I have some larger images on the back that we've already gone over. Let's do this first. Landscape plan, which is page 21 of the packet. Jeff at Kentucky Design has done a preliminary site plan with some landscaping ideas, and he can certainly answer some more specific questions in a little bit, but I think it's coming along. And in the PIP portion for phase 1, there's an enlarged phase 1 area landscape plan that we can talk to as well. This is a street section along Lower Metropolitan Place. So we're looking at a design idea that brings parallel parking into the mix. So from outboard in your sidewalk, parallel, bike lane, and then 2 13-foot wide traffic lanes. Idea being this really helps slow traffic down. I think this is a widely used street section for this type of application, and I will defer to Jeff for any more specifics on that. And then we've got some of the technical drawings if anyone wants to talk engineering.
Can we actually, Jeff, since we're here, can you actually just come up and kind of talk them through how you approach that landscape plan? Because I think, normally we would not bring in such a great quality landscape guy as Ken Psyche, but we really wanted to make sure we hit a home run with the landscaping here, just to make sure that when you entered this development, it felt like a place, and you weren't seeing parking, and you weren't seeing massive buildings. You were, using landscaping to the best of our ability to try to temper down all the traditional things of commercial development. So,
thanks. Yeah, my name is Jeff Steen. I'm with Ken Psyche Design. And our strategy for this project was taking a look at this park that's going to become the focal point of this development. And no matter how that gets designed, we want that to be the inspiration for the landscape, I think. And what we've started to do is let that park, let the urban forest, say, bleed out into some of the more urban areas that you can see along Memorial, Upper Metropolitan, and even off of Broadway. So we have taller canopy trees, and the strategy for those is everything has higher branching characteristics because we want to allow visibility into this site from Broadway, from Bridge Road, from everywhere because of the businesses and stuff that are happening, and also from the river. We have a pretty cool potential and opportunity to create native habitat down in this nook here, this southeast nook, and when customers are sitting on that patio along Broadway, it's our attempt to block out the traffic, but kind of borrow the landscape, borrow that river, and bring in habitat. So that's where we're at, and we're moving it forward pretty quickly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think we're still kind of in presentation mode for the GDP when we flip through those.
For those pictures, yeah.
Yeah.
So the team kind of shared some of the concerns last time with the building C placement, orientation, the effects that it has on parking, and we spent a lot of time on this.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a street view from Google just for orientation purposes. So this is obviously on Broadway, just in front of the Monona State Bank. So from this perspective, I jumped through a model. You're still catching the block of Monona State Bank in this drawing. That's where we currently have the building position, moving it forward, turning it. And I can come back to any of these. I'm going to go fairly quick because there's a lot of them. This is a little more central to the new entrance off of Broadway. So I think what's interesting here is that's where we currently have it, and one of the proposed movements was up to get a double a 60-foot wide swath of parking behind it. I think that the feel on Broadway doesn't change very much. And there, that's getting really close to our 20-foot setback for ATC. Rotated, sliding over that way. I think this is a little more dead on. What's in that building right now, Steve? The one straight ahead?
The orange one?
Yeah.
That's actually not there. It's torn down. That
Was it?
That was inland storage.
Okay. Well, we don't have to demolish that one then. So there's the framed entrance between the two buildings, looking, beyond through here. You're looking at the green roof on the B building. Position 2, 3. Okay. Other side of Broadway. One of the things we talked about before coming here is the perspective from the street and the landscaping that we're proposing along Broadway. It is really going to help buffer the feel of a large parking lot. 2, 3. It's about at the bridge. This is down, of course, on Metropolitan Lane, looking back towards, so we're standing about where the northern edge of the plaza will be. Bridge Road.
The library will close in 2 minutes. Please bring your items to the main desk for checkout. At this time, we ask all patrons
Up high.
to leave their-
You guys getting sick of this yet? These ones are really easy to tell from above. Not a very realistic perspective, of course, but
So let's
That's
go
it.
back to the beginning, because this.
here. Let's just close it and open it.
So I'm kind of the one that's been pushing hard to keep these buildings symmetrical, because the whole ground floor of that first phase building is all going to be commercial retail. And I don't feel that we can afford to have a building block all of those storefronts as you're coming eastbound on Broadway. From our standpoint, or from mine and Aaron's standpoint, we need that first phase to be so successful that we're able to do phase 2 and phase 3. And we feel very strongly that if we have to put phase C's building directly in front of all of the traffic that's coming eastbound on Broadway, that we are going to have a really hard time leasing that building. And we've actually talked to a few of the people that were going to lease space, potentially, hopefully lease space to in this project. And putting that building out on the road would likely be enough to lose a couple of those potential retailers. So I understand the concern the city has of wanting a more of an urbanist feel. Frankly, I live here. I would rather have that too. There's just not a practical way to lay it out. I mean, if the only other thing we could potentially even look at doing is changing the entire layout and bringing both buildings to the road, so that we didn't have blocked visibility to one entire building. So, we looked at, like Adam said, the 4 different options. Adam did all these different models. We looked at, do you move it just a little bit? Even just moving it a little bit blocks that whole western side of the building, which is where we're trying to land the coffee shop. And we really don't gain much, because you move it a little bit and you gain parking in the rear, but then you have this disjointed parking and you start to confuse people how to enter that building. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm sure we'll have questions and answers on that. I just wanted to get a little more background on the time we put into studying that.
All right, any other items for the GDP? I think we're good. GDP. All right, we can close item 5A, the public hearing, and move on to 5B, which is consideration of action on the request by Galway Companies for approval of the GDP Yahara Commons for redevelopment area number 9 at 802 and 900 West Broadway, 6320, 6321 Metropolitan Lane, 6406, 6416, 6418 Bridge Road for mixed-use development, including approximately 233 residential units, 26,000 square feet of commercial space, 33,000 square feet of office space, and a public park. Sunny, you want to kick us off?
So this is our second review of the general development plan at Plan Commission, and on the agenda it's written for action, but based on a lot of the issues, mainly those issues that were reviewed in the Strand letter, our ultimate recommendation is to take no action on this tonight, and the applicants are aware of that, and I think we're all okay with delaying it a little bit, but just to highlight some points in the staff report to discuss. The city staff report main issues were parking, the building C orientation, and the building B mass. Those were some of the comments from the last Plan Commission review. And then the Strand report has other issues, and Josh Straka is here from Strand. He'll present those. On page 5 of the staff report is where the parking review begins. And that table A shows that the CDA, which was actually Vanderwall and Associates preparing the plans and reviewing them with the CDA, used the metrics listed for each land use in that table, and you can see that they're fairly similar to what the target goals of the applicants were. And then on page 6, there's some additional discussion of how the actual proposed number of parking stalls, which totals 653, compares to that CDA target ratio, as well as to Appendix A of the zoning code. And Appendix A, again, is the strict standard that would be applied to any new development in Monona, but because this is a general development plan and it's following Article F of the zoning code, some flexibility may be allowed. So a realistic goal would maybe be somewhere in between the target ratio and what's required by Appendix A of the code. And just to explain column 4 a little bit further of that table B, which is highlighted in yellow. And as Brian pointed out, the total number of stalls that they're deficient based on the zoning code requirements is only 7. In the paragraph above that, I explained that that includes everything on the street parking. So we should just understand that the street parking would be used to meet minimum requirements for those land uses. So it will be used by residents, restaurant patrons, guests of residents, etc. And then I also wanted to point out that the 660 required in the code, I just rechecked my math. It's actually based on the phase 2 building being 137 units. So if they actually go up to 165 units, the minimum requirement would be more than that. We just don't have the bedroom unit mix in order to determine what that would be tonight. And then in the next paragraph below, the shared parking analysis is based off of the table that Adam prepared for the packet, and it explains that there's a total of 315 parking stalls that can be shared across the whole site. There's a remainder of 338 parking stalls that would be blocked off with secure access for residents in underground spaces and covered for the office. So out of those 315 parking stalls, the table in the packet explains how many would be left over during certain parts of the day. And I had a few examples. On a Saturday evening, the packet estimated that 424 out of 653 would be used, which would leave a surplus of 229 stalls that could be used for overflow parking for things like park events, residents, guests, and restaurant patrons. So that's all I wanted to summarize on parking. I think we covered enough of the architecture comments. And open it up to Josh Straka to give an overview of the Strand letter.
I might be able to
just there, or
I might go back to that one or come on to this thing, right? Chris, you're going to show me Okay, I feel like kind of a buzzkill because this seems like an awesome development, and we have to point out things that don't quite work.
That's why we pay you.
Well, I think we should start off by saying, there's comments in this letter. I might use that. Yeah, is that okay? there's comments in this letter, but we had a good meeting after they submitted it with them, the development team. I think all this stuff is work, we can work through. There's nothing really big in here. There's just on this general first, layout, there was just things that in the city's best interest, we were just kind of looking out for as we kind of went through this. So I'm just going to step through all those in here or briefly. I'm on. You're going to tell me about this bad boy.
Written there.
Well, you can read it, point right to it, everybody will see it. Zoom in and over here.
So the first thing is just general site layout, design. There's a few issues up front along the county right away. Oh boy. Zoom in here. So, the first one's ATC. I'm going to try to point ATC's line out here. You can't see it, it's kind of shaded, but it kind of goes directly across kind of where the parking was proposed originally in the GDP. I believe you guys probably have had some conversations with maybe ATC, and they probably are going to provide some sort of a setback from where they want to have their stuff. So right now you're kind of right on top of them with the parking structure. So our comment was, you're going to have to work with them to set back during construction, during the permanent condition, the fill that you're going to do potentially within this right-of-way to come up and meet this road, and how are the clearances between their lines going to be, things like that that obviously are going to have to get worked out as part of that utility. The other one's Dane County right-of-way. Again, the right-of-way line's also pretty close to where this permanent structure was. They're actually coming out on it a little bit as part of this development. Working along with Dane County again, contacting them, understanding, where can we have that parking structure? Do we purchase right away? Do we not purchase right away and come back? I think it's between that and then also MMSD's line that's basically in the same exact location. It's actually a little bit behind this overhead line. It's kind of screaming that all this has to come back a little bit. And the development team knows that. We had good conversations about that to avoid some of those big things right up front along the right of way. There's also a wetland along the right of way that is kind of currently sort of right in this area up in here along Broadway. Not a big concern. We believe that it's just basically DNR correspondence, and there's probably can pursue a wetland exemption for this area, but it's something that needs to happen as part of the development. Make sure the conversation happens on the front side. We talked about the interceptor sewer. This is just general overall kind of stuff initially when we looked at the grading of it. They talked about maybe changing the parking a little bit, and that'll probably come out in some of their second renditions as the next development plan comes forward. Snow storage, as you guys continue forward, where are you gonna put snow? Usually that's kind of shown on these plans. Where are they going to store snow as part of it? Where's the fire truck movements going to happen as part of the site? We know as part of this big building, there's this fire access lane, but then overall in all the buildings, what are kind of the fire movements that are going to be needed as part of this larger development? Site grading, we did look at overall, and that appears to be pretty darn good at this stage, in our opinion, if I can find it here. Maybe I can't. Maybe I should just stick to the big one up here. So in general, everything's draining back down. So the way it's shown now, everything's draining back down to the public park space, where they're proposing kind of an underground storage area within the park for stormwater control. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That kind of leads to the stormwater side of things. And what are we going to do with stormwater? As part of our initial meeting with the development team, there's a culvert that crosses Bridge Road right here. Picks up drainage from some of this development on this side, crosses in a ditch through a culvert, and in sort of a ditch all the way along here. That's what's making this wetland right here. And then it's kind of a very flat ditch and then outlets over into the Yahara River. So as part of this, they plan on filling a lot of this right away in because they're going to be building those structures up. Is taking hard pipe and maybe going all the way to the Yahara River across this site. Maybe at the same time there's chance and opportunity in some of these green areas as they push some of this improvements back. You'll have a larger green space there that they can get some BMPs as far as treating the lots here into those before they dump out into the river. Now, that might limit some of our stormwater needs that are back here in this green space, because we can control them up here on the front side and go to this ditch system. Just a thought, just a suggestion. So the overall stormwater management, we didn't review a report at this time, but I think we're going to be looking for, and talking with the city, something a little bit more substantial on understanding exactly what are going to be the requirements for this development. We know that we've disturbed over 3,000 acres. It's a redevelopment site.
3,000 square feet.
3,000 square feet. 3,000 acres would be a big development. I don't think you guys got that much space around here. 3,000 square feet, and as part of that, we need to get 40% TSS removal. Right now, you guys took the conservative approach when you looked at it and said, okay, let's look at all the hardscape we have and treat it right down here at one facility. While that's good, it would be nice, I know we're showing a lot of green space here, green roof. Maybe there's a little bit of discussion in here about BMPs and where we can treat some of the water. It would be nice to kind of lay out that plan and at least pin some of those areas down as best we can, because that ultimately is going to size this thing. If we size it for everything without any control, it's going to be very large, and it's going to cost everybody a little bit of money. But also, if it's oversized, we have somewhat of a fear of it, there being too much water in there, or the water doesn't recycle out of there if it's an underground facility fast enough. And just what does that mean under a public park space if the water's not getting out of there fast enough if you oversize it? So I think a little bit more thought on the front side of that would be probably a good thing. As far as runoff rate control, they're going to have less impervious, hardscape than they have today. So rate control requirements will not be needed, but that would be something in the stormwater stuff that you point out. Sort of, what is the impervious today? What is it going to be in the future? Just so we can see that. The oil and grease control will come in the individual PIPs. That's about all I had on stormwater. Outlets, there'll be 2 outlets then, probably likely the same outlet that maintains here, depending if you put a hard system in there, and then another outlet that comes through the park. Both of those are somewhat defined in the GDP. Then getting back towards just vehicle circulation and traffic engineering standpoint, there's one thing that I pointed out a couple times, and that's something for the city to consider, is the connector road. So we have this metropolitan lane, something that the city's going to own afterwards. It's going to have water under it. It's going to have wastewater under it. It's going to have city storm sewer under it. And as part of the connector road, there's no utilities that are proposed underneath it. And it's ultimately something that the city's going to take ownership of. It's a little, it's kind of more of a parking lot in the sense of a road. It has 90-degree parking, and you don't really see 90-degree parking on city streets. At least it is kind of hard to find. I was trying to think of an area that I could think of it. There's some urban areas down in Milwaukee, but they're interior to the street. But 90-degree parking is going to act like a parking lot. So the only caution I throw out there is when people back out of these stalls, they're going across both lanes. Now, if it was angle parking, they wouldn't be going across both lanes. Likely they'd pull back into the lane they came from and continue on. I know parking's an issue and there's some concerns there, but overall, just think about that as a connector road and snow removal and the feel of it as being a city street versus more of a parking lot. Right now the proposal is that you guys are going to take control of this right away and this right away, and the public space and the utilities underneath them. But that's just something to consider as you move along and on a public street sense of things. Obviously, you can see in this rendition, and I'm pretty sure the development team cleaned it up a little bit, as there's sharp corners here. We'd like that to be rounded off more as a municipal street for curves, and we have some information in here on that. A little bit of ADA access issues potentially at this intersection. I haven't looked at it too close, but there's some steep grades coming off of this parking area down, and just are those ramps going to work? And then the last kind of, well, I shouldn't say the last thing, but the other bigger issue is with the yacht club. And that was just really, how are we going to maintain access that they have here today along the yacht club? We had a good discussion with the development team on that. The idea was to get rid of the sidewalk on this side. So there would not be sidewalk on this side. And this curb would become all mountable. all the way down to where the boat landing would be. And that would allow them to kind of use that access as they have today, in and out, wherever they feel. Right now, they kind of park all along this building, and they park out in the city's existing right-of-way. There's kind of really no definition of where that right-of-way is, because all it is pavement, so people are parking wherever. We would set that right-of-way line by, the curb line. Maybe set the curb a couple feet inside of that right-of-way line, and then they could have everything on the other side as they pull through. And I'm sure the development team will come up with something there as part of allowing them to have this access back along this building. And that was your biggest thing, Sonia, as part of that, is just having to deal with access agreements along that building. I know it's a parcel that isn't being changed as part of this development. Bridge Road, we had some discussions about Bridge Road and the parking on Bridge Road, and to try to accommodate additional parking here. The current plan on Bridge Road now, as far as a public works standpoint, was to only put parking on the City of Madison side and have bike lanes in either direction. So right now, currently, there's parking on each side with no bike lanes. So Public Works, when they were going to redo the street, was going to put bike lanes on both sides and then just parking, the other side of the street is the City of Madison. So really, Monona only has the eastern half of that street. They were going to leave parking on the other side, and the City of Madison was fine with bike lanes in each direction. I know the development team had some discussions with us at that meeting about maybe eliminating bike lanes on Bridge Road, keeping the parking on both sides, and let's keep the bike lanes within the development. Keep the people coming into the development, have them come to the public park space. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that's a good idea. The only thing to consider is what are they going to do when they get down here on Broadway. So there's bike lanes in each direction on Broadway, and we're going to have to get them across here to the other side if they want to head to, let's say, the Waypoint. Maybe they won't have to go to the Waypoint because you'll have everything there that they won't have to go that far. But that's just a concern about it, where on Bridge Road, we do have a signal there for them to get across, at the signal with bikes. So that's a consideration that I think staff, Public Works, and this committee is going to have to decide. Where, it makes sense to have bike lanes in here. Do we also need them out on Bridge Road? Do they have to be there, or can we provide the extra parking along the development side? Utilities. The utilities are pretty straightforward in the sense that the water today kind of routes itself through this development, and we'll just make sure that we make the connection down on Bridge Road and tie it back into Upper Metropolitan Lane. The sanitary sewer, which is an MMSD line that runs along here, cuts through the Chase building up to their lift station, will have to be rerouted through the city streets. We've had conversations with MMSD. They are open to that. We can get great on their gravity sewer to make that happen. And then the city would ultimately tie in from this side because they serve a little bit of development down here with the sewer. You guys do. We'll tie back into that. And then we either are going to have to run our own private sewer, or we're going to try to see if we can get MMSD to let us tie right directly into their line. So that's still a conversation that needs to happen as part of that vote. And some of that will have to do with monitoring and whether they want to take them on directly. Like I said, as part of this, there seems like there's a lot of little details, but I think our recommendation would be at this point to kind of see that update, kind of see what direction they're going, make sure that they've made some of these changes or have taken some of this into consideration before we would probably give approval based on the city standards. And that's kind of how we left it, knowing that the development team was coming back anyways after our meeting. So that was just, these comments are based on what you see here today.
All right. Go for it, Sonny.
Just a quick summary then of where we are. Some of these issues are a little bit more detailed than you would typically see in the general development plan approval, but they're so integral to the other pieces of the development. So when you talk about shifting the building A, the red one, north to avoid ATC, and the MMSD sanitary line, you're talking about perhaps taking out a whole row of parking in the underground garage. On building B, if you add parking to Bridge Road, and then also shift to make the changes in front of the yacht club, you're squeezing that area a little bit, and right now it's shown at 135 units, but I think what the developer is really looking for is closer to 160. So again, all this just impacts the number of parking stalls that would be available. Also the curves in the road impact how the buildings lay out and the parking structures. Just a quick summary there.
All right, and commission members, Griff, you want to start off?
Well, I guess I still have a concern with the parking, and I have a concern of how it's all going to work out with the yacht club and the other uses down there. On the face of it, it would not appear to me that parking on the other side of Bridge Road is going to be very helpful to the development or to the needs that are going to be presented by this project. So I will eagerly await to see what the final resolution of that is.
Susan?
Yeah, well, I think it's worth thinking about the bike lane on Bridge Road and keeping the parking there instead, because I kind of agree with that. I don't know if we can afford to give up that parking. I think that remains a concern. I had a question about the units themselves, the apartment units, the high number of efficiency unit studio apartments versus one-bedroom apartments. And I just am wondering, it seems like a lot of studio apartments to me, and I'm just wondering what the market shows, how those rent. And I don't know whether we have experience with that in Monona already or not, but.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing an uptick in the smaller units compared to the 2-bedroom, depending on area and location. I think the mix that we're presenting here is very close to what we're doing around Madison, Milwaukee, and other areas.
So that mix of studio versus one-bedroom, I guess that's what I was more concerned about.
Right.
Yeah, layout of that efficiency.
Like a unit plan
Probably
for it?
not. Yeah, probably
not.
Those
readily
efficiencies
available.
are
There
not
was
laid out.
one.
Those efficiencies are not laid out like you would typically see. They are not typically laid out like you would typically see an efficiency, just a square box with a kitchen.
Yeah.
I think there's 720 square feet-ish.
The studios?
Yeah,
They're like 550.
The one bedrooms are 720.
Yeah.
Okay, so traditional studio might be in the 400s. You know, we're 20% bigger just to give the people that rent them the option to put a divider in to create a bedroom sense of place in there. So they are a little bit larger than you would typically see in a traditional box efficiency.
As far as rentability, I assume since you want to rent them, you've looked at that to see
Yeah, I mean,
whether they do rent.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple market studies that we've looked at, and you know, the one bedrooms and efficiencies are what are renting the best right now. And
What's the average price differential of that? I mean, is that
between
for rent, I guess, of a studio or efficiency versus a one-bedroom?
You know, one bedroom is going to be, you know, 9. Yeah.
Okay. So it's, okay. That's substantial. Otherwise, all the issues that were just raised are wood issues I think need to be worked out. So that was the main, I guess, question. I also kind of prefer leaving the buildings as they originally were, having building the Phase 3 buildings, Building C, I guess, where you had it originally made sense to me. I think visually that always looked better to me anyway, so I don't have an issue with that. I don't know how it's going to be affected if you have to move one further north, but that'll be for you guys to work out, I guess.
Rob?
First off, I appreciate all the different iterations and all the different layouts for Building C. That really helps to kind of give us an idea. I know you went through it quickly, but ultimately, with that building, I'm fine with it right where it's at, kind of. One thing I like about it is it kind of lets Monona State Bank and Building A kind of bookend the development. As you're coming, if you're heading west on Broadway, kind of gives a little bit of a glimpse into that public kind of center area, which I like, which you would kind of lose if you brought that building all the way forward. I realize there's a million ways to do it, but ultimately I'm okay with that. The bike lane on Bridge, I don't know if I'm willing to get rid of that necessarily. I don't know what that street section would look like, how wide that drive lane would be with parking. Would it be a 12-foot lane, or because people do ride on that. I guess the bike lane would pick up right after the development, I assume, heading into Monona.
Yeah, I mean, it would go right back out onto Bridge Road, and actually it lines up. You know, one of the nice things about relocating it through our development is Metropolitan lines up pretty close to where the bike trail goes back towards the lake. I mean, it's literally right across the street, so it would be a natural. Cause this go back up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if you
Can you switch back to the document?
There's not a lot of
Power
commuters
cord,
on
we're
the
about to
bridge,
lose
that's what
juice here in a
happens.
second.
Commuters would take the bike
Yeah.
path,
can you switch back and put that?
I think.
Brought it up at the last meeting, the river, that edge treatment, has there been more thought about what that's going to be, the river edge, the wall, basically?
We haven't gotten into the details of exactly what it is yet, but we're envisioning, you know, a hard surface river walk directly adjacent to the river edge, so people can get off their boats and connect up to the park, or
Okay.
go to the retail restaurant spaces. And as much green space as we can get between the two. So what you're seeing up here is, I think now is as good a time as any to talk about this, but this is an update per all the things that Josh has talked about. So we've considered the setbacks along Broadway, the access to the yacht club, and what it does to this development as a whole. So we moved all these parts and pieces a little bit to account for just about everything Josh talked about. I think there's still some fine tuning that needs to happen. However, just so if you're wondering what the differences are here, we can talk a little bit more about it. But to your question, you know, there will be nicely landscaped space between the building face and that hard surface riverwalk.
Yeah, we created a little bit more space, I mean, probably 15 feet.
The whole building, the whole A building moved west. I think it was about 10 feet, and north about 20 feet. So a combination of that, along with losing 30 parking stalls out of our lower level parking to get past that APC setback. So it looks very similar in plan, but what you don't see is the loss of a side of parking in the lower level. You know, and I think that we're able to revise the park space a little bit to get the concept to still work. You know, where I was headed with that is the space on the edge of this lower level event / restaurant space is on the Building A property side on the park and could be used for spill out seating as well. So green space, spill out seating, green space, access through the A building to the upper level commercial space. You've got some hard surface in front of the park building for access to that, and then green space all the way along the rest of the side of the park. So we're starting to get into the details of how the landscaping transitions from the building to the park.
Underground parking, we really, because we talked about that in our meeting, to kind of soften that entry and exit out of the underground parking, because that was a concern. And then softening the edges of the road.
Can you come up to for the millions and millions and millions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just saying that we I think it was actually brought up at our last meeting, the entry and exit out of the underground parking in Building A. So that was taken into account here in softening the road edges and curves. It was pretty rigid in the iteration that we talked about previously. So I think that kind of works, and then also the kind of almost looks like a roundabout there, kind of brings the bike path and the walks together.
Yeah, and the concept, the organizational concept there with the access to the yacht club, you know, we're basically proposing that there's a valley gutter along the property line. We don't disturb the pavement on their side. If we do perpendicular parking beyond that, they can potentially use that as well as their existing paving as truck and trailer stalls. But once we do that, then the bike, a bike lane doesn't really make sense over here anymore, so we're back on a bike path on the B building side of the road, and then transitioning that through here. So what we're thinking, just as an initial concept, was this is bike path, 2-lane coming into here. You've got one way coming around, transitioning to a bike lane as you come out of the circle, and then bike lane transitions to bike path here with a lot of bike parking ability around the central space. And this could potentially be part of the Building B project, but something that is utilized by bike path users. Maybe it's a repair shop type of thing where you can go in, fix a tire, get some water. So creating this central destination on the bike path that isn't all the way in the park. There's still a lot of flexibility for how that park can be designed, but it happens along the road, engages the B building, and offers sort of a visual sense of place. So
let's point out where that bike lane goes into the Capital City Trail. How do you zoom back?
it's kind of difficult. Yeah, like that. Top image.
So this is where the bike path would leave the development. The Capital City Bike Trail's right here. So it just basically goes right across the street.
Rob, did you have more?
I was just going to comment on building B, based on that one illustration of what you did I like the articulation. I don't think it looks too much of a big long facade. Just positive comment there.
Yeah, we really tried to kind of step it, right?
I like that.
Step
I think
on
it
the
looks...
other side of Bridge Road up to our building A, which is 5 stories. So that would be, sections at 2, 3, and 4 stories within building B.
And then one final comment. With that building C, if that ends up being the position of that, I think the opportunity to do something really cool and special in that lower metropolitan entrance would really set the whole project off, and it's kind of a very important spot.
Definitely.
Kathy?
So I apologize, I was not here at the earlier meeting, I was out of the city. So, but I have 3 comments, questions. One, the bike path. I'm not sure who the intended users of the bike path along Bridge Road would be. But right now, I live on the bike path, and lots of people go around the bike path. If I were going to put a bike path in, I might want to drive them through here because it's a city park, and bikers like to stop for coffee or get something to drink. And so they can go through there. They can always turn right. I mean, if you're a commuter, you're not going to go out and take the Beltline on a bike. You're going to take the bike path. So it makes a great deal more sense to have it go through. And it also better serve, hopefully you'll have a lot of bikers who are there who also will use the bike paths within the development. So I think moving it into the development makes a great deal of sense from my perspective. My second question is just one out of curiosity, and that is the yacht club. Where are those people don't have enough room to park there now? Where will they park after the development is done?
Well,
I mean, I know it's not.
This is a tough conversation, right? Because they're parking on property that they don't own right now.
That's right. Yep.
So I don't know that we can come
It's
up
not
with
your.
a
It's not your.
solution. Well,
okay.
we want to be good neighbors. I don't want to say it's not our problem because we want to be good neighbors. I don't know how to come up with a solution though when they don't have the parking right now.
The problem is they're going to park in your stalls. That means many times if you go down there now, they go across the street on Bridge Road and park in those apartment buildings. They park on Bridge Road or they park behind EDS. But the reality is, the people who go there, they're not going to care whose property they're parking
Our
on.
parking will be monitored, and if it's an issue, we'll address it.
Okay. Then my third point was, in terms of moving that building, you have a lot invested. We, the city, have a lot invested in this. What we don't need is spots that are difficult for you to lease to commercial users. We used to have a shopping center down on Bridge Road in the EDS building, a long time ago, probably before you were born. But it didn't work out very well. And so we need to work with you to allow for you to be, so I have no problem leaving it where, as you want it, because I'd like it to be successful, as we all would.
Yep, sure. I just have one other comment on the yacht club parking. If you were to overlay a line of where their current stalls are in front of the building, this layout actually improves their parking quite a bit, because a lot of what's parked off their property is a truck and trailer. So they would have the ability to put that in front of the building, at least in some portion, and they've got a little more space, than they did before that they could use. So
Okay.
I think that this was a good change to improve that access.
I was going to ask you, you didn't comment on the landscape plan. Do you have comments on it?
Commenting on what at this point.
He said the entryway is going to be key, I think.
I did, yeah. Doing something unique and special in that area, and then having the rest of the landscape complement what's kind of done there.
And to your comment on the bike path, too, we're trying to, it was obvious how important it was to the city and everybody who's worked on this for the last however many years, that this incorporates the biker. So, I mean, our goal with the type of commercial spaces that our tenants were putting in this building, that this is like the southern destination of the lake, because there's nothing else really to stop at. And knowing that, we use the lake loop, I mean, it'd be nice to have a place to stop and have a beer, or let the kids play and.
Drunken biking.
Or they drive me.
Chris?
Okay, first, Steve, you weren't here last time. I applaud you on what you're trying to do here. It's a great project. This would be a huge improvement for Monona. Having said that, we have a couple disconnects that I'd like to talk about. Sure. Where we don't totally agree. First time I've had a Strand reviewed here for such a major project for a while, and I'd like to compliment Strand. You guys did a great job on a quick, rough review, and then just giving us a little synopsis that wasn't 28 pages long on what the main talking points were, and I like that. It was an easy read, so I wasn't up all night last night. So thanks for that. In no particular order, you mentioned the buildings that were going to stay. You didn't mention that AT&T shack, where it is. Does that stay? That's what I thought. So that's one more building than that stays. I didn't talk about this last time. There is an existing permitted boat ramp inside Inland Boats. Have we given any consideration to using that? Because it's permitted by the DNR. And I don't suspect we will put a public boat launch through that little bitty park. We'd ruin it. But, we have a lot of people like to canoe and kayak and do a lot of things. We have a permitted boat launch. Wouldn't that be neat to have a little area to walk into the water or do something with that? Where I'm talking, the Quonset hut, you drive through one end, there's a garage door on the other end, they have a boat launch that goes right into the yard.
Yeah.
And if it fits based on where your building is, it might be neat, if nothing else, to incorporate that into the park.
That is something that was drawn into the city's concept plans. I think it will come with the more detailed design of the park.
It would be fun to keep it since we have another permitted launch, and I'm not suggesting we try to take boats. We just upgraded Lotus, and that works great for that. But it might be nice for the people that have non-motorized vehicles for the water, just to have a place to walk in and not be bothered by other ones. So, just a thought.
I think there was some concerns brought up too along the way, though, of just the current and stuff going through there and getting in and out.
Now we've all voted there. That's the easy place. I might as well hit parking. I think parking for me is a big problem. And number one, the yacht club. And I know it may be a difficult conversation for you, but I don't think it's a difficult conversation for the city and the people, especially on the council and the mayor. We're investing millions and millions of dollars of our money in this project. We can't ignore an existing business. Now, if you look at the yacht club right now, I went down there today. They have 25 stalls that park parallel to the road by the south end of their building. They've got another 10 that head straight in. That's 25 right on their building. There's probably 5, give or take. I'm going to say 5 for easy math. So I'm saying on street parking on Metropolitan Lane or whatever I call it. So that's 40 stalls right there. right across from the EDS, those 10 stalls, we all know what happens when EDS closes down at night, when the restaurant gets busy, those 10 stalls are used for the restaurant. And down in the boats, there's another 10 stalls once they close are used. That's 60 without ever even getting on the EDS parking lot. And there was shared parking in that. And then we did, as a plan commission, we talked about that, and we gave them a permit to be there based on shared parking and what was there right now. So without going in EDS's parking lot, there's 60 stalls that they're probably using, and I don't go down there a lot, but I've been down there for dinner, and I've parked in EDS's main parking lot. So we know they're consuming 60, 70, 80 stalls. So for us as a city to invest millions of dollars and say, we really want to attract these new businesses, which we do, but we're going to ignore the existing one, I think that's really poor on our part. I think the developer may not have to, but we're investing in this, and we have to consider how we're going to keep an existing business open without just cutting them off at the knees. So, because it's our problem, it becomes part of your problem too. And then we don't usually allow parking stalls on public streets to be counted in the parking totals. Yet on this one we are. So now there's 23, well, not that now, you've redone this, but there were 23 stalls, but now the yacht club's fighting all your apartment residents for those stalls. So it's really not even, you don't even have those. I think we've grossly underserved an existing business. Whatever we do, we have to think about what's going to have the parking for that. It does us no good to bring in 3 new restaurants and shut one down. And the restaurant can't survive with what's there right now. And we knew that when we gave them a zoning permit for that property. So I think as a community, we owe it to them to figure out some type of a solution. And we do have a major stake in this project. So I know it's difficult for you, but it's something the city has to consider. And what will we do for that existing business? We talked about trying to get a little more brick in this. I'm not sure. On ours, they were pretty small. The vertical elements you have above the 2 ground floors, it looks like there might be a lot of depth to those, is there?
Yeah, they return.
So the returns are brick?
Yeah.
Okay, see that'll change it. And the stuff we had, it's really dark and it looks like just this little finger coming up there.
Come up and look at the boards close.
Yeah, and so with those, I think that would change my perspective. Yeah, so the front on one, I'm not so, but when I look at the side one coming along by your patios and everything, that's actually brick returns, correct? I want everybody to see. Where I'm talking about is when you look at the regular elevations, you see this, but with the brick returns, I think it helps with for me, the substance of the building, the mass of it with the masonry. So, thanks. I wasn't sure I could see all that. I think green space is the other issue we talked about last time. I haven't seen any changes. We're probably losing a little bit again. If you take out the city property, which will be the park and the road right-of-ways, I haven't seen a green space ratio yet, but I imagine there's a reason I haven't seen this because it's really not too pretty.
We're battling the parking and the green space.
And that gets to my main point is you've got so much density here. 78 dwelling units per acre is massive. We've never come close to that. I'm talking about on your phase 2, your building B. That's a massive density. And that's what's driving all these other issues, the parking, the green space, things like that. And I know we need to get as much as we can in and be successful. There's a point where you put too much in and everything collapses around it if you put too much in it. So for me, I think it's the density. It's going back. You want to up the density from 135 to 165 or whatever, and that throws the parking numbers we have even further out of skew. Our ordinance will probably be somewhere around 700 stalls once that happens for what we would ask for. And our ordinance is 700 stalls without street parking. And this is, 500 and some with, 90 some street parking, which you don't have anymore because you're redoing the yacht club, and then we've lost 30 stalls in underground. So for me, the biggest obstacle to this thing is parking. The green space one, we can probably get around because we don't have a lot of areas to work on, but what we do, I guess my comment for the landscape, it has to be incredible. And for me, it has to intensify way above what's here. I mean, a lot of this, the street trees and some of the terrace trees, it's a standard Jenny parking lot. I mean, if we're going to be, we talked about that last time, if we're going to be short on green space, we need to be really spectacular with what we have left. And I know you want to do it for your project because it gives you the curb appeal, it makes it attractive. Mm-hmm. But for me, looking at the GDP, that's something that somehow we need to certainly for GDP, we need to look at what are the green space ratios for each phase and what are we doing to make up for what's not there. The Riverwalk, which you talked about, you're not sure what you're going to do yet. I get that, but when we get to the PIP for this thing, that's a detail we'll need to know. And I know we're not doing it tonight, we're gonna talk about the PIP, but I mean, if we come back for another submittal, that would be a detail along with the landscape and everything else would be important to have. Question for Josh, wetland, I caught you, didn't I?
No, I was actually gonna look at a map of what that boat launch.
Okay.
I'm working at the same
Okay,
time.
all right, good. I believe with the new DNR regulations, it's been created by a drainage structure, drainage feature, the way it works. You get Wendy Pike there, she looks at it, says, yeah, boom, it's out. I think it's pretty simple, and this clearly has been created by a drainage structure. It's a ditch we as City of Monona had. Actually, when the yacht club redid all their docks, they put their dewatering bags right in the middle of that ditch. They backed the ditch up, and our drainage facility didn't drain like it used to, and when they're taken out, it had sedimented up by then. And so I think that's an easy one to get out. So I don't see that as a huge issue, I hope, because
As far as, like, it's gonna hold it up or something.
I don't think so, because I think it's clearly part of our existing drainage facility, which would give it that exemption right away.
It should give an exemption.
Yeah, okay.
It might be something just to kind of, make.
Oh, we gotta have our radar up for that, but I'm hoping that's not a big deal for this project. It shouldn't be for where it's at. Bike lanes versus parking on Bridge Road, a couple comments. I think it's gonna be a hard sell to the city of Madison to say we're not gonna have bike lanes there. I think regardless of what happens, it makes sense to run them through your development. I think that just brings customers in. I think it's a great idea, but I can see the city of Madison come in there and say, well, we got Lake Point, we got a lot of areas of our residents we want to serve, and we all know Madison loves bike lanes, so I think it's going to be hard to get them out of there. If you can, great. If you can't, I would work really hard as the city of Monona to get the parking on Monona's side and not Madison's side, because we've got development needs that we've got commercial, we've got higher densities, and I think it would make a lot more sense to have the parking. The street width is the street width, but we really, if we can't get them out of there, we need to lobby to have the parking on our side of Bridge Road, because we have a greater need than they do. They have adequate parking on that side. So it'd be a comment for Public Works or whoever ends up doing that negotiating. Your parking garage, I'm a little worried about it. You're going to have a 40-ton route that the fire department can take. What happens when they go off that route in the middle of an emergency? I mean, is the rest of the underground parking, what's it rated for? What happens when a trash truck comes for pickup and he goes through there? We've all seen it happen in parking lots. I think it's a concern for you.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's something you should give some thought to. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it takes to bip it up for that 40-ton. I'm a little worried when you say, well, here's the route we laid out for the fire department, and this is where it'll take 40-ton, and nowhere else can. And you know, God forbid they have to come through there in the middle of an emergency. We all know what happens. There's vehicles and things all over the place. I'd be a little worried that the rest of that underground structure, for example, can only take half that weight or something, and then there's a catastrophe from that, or you get some newbie on a trash truck, and you know, first thing they do when they come off the site, they raise all those axles. They put incredible weights, more than we're allowed on roads anymore, on your private property. And if they're there on that underground structure on top of that, and it's not designed to handle it, it'll be tough.
Yeah, we've raised these concerns with our structural
Yeah.
engineer, and quite frankly, we've built houses, we've never had to do this, right? 40-ton, it's
Mhm.
a big deal.
That's a big deal.
And we met with the fire chief and the assistant fire chief, and what's the protocol? How do you guys typically, and they train. They go to every new building as it's being built, and they train. These are the spots we go. And that's part of the reason for the rolled curb cut off of Broadway
Sure.
here.
So they have access.
So they have access, and it's clean and it's smooth, and they can turn and they can get their ladders up.
And do they put out outriggers?
Yes.
And so that puts a point load on there,
And that's-
which is tough to design to.
Well, and that's what's driving the cost for the
Okay.
roof on that.
Yeah. It's just a point, when I hear that, I have to bring it up. That's
Believe
it.
me, we have the same concerns.
That's what I have. The biggest thing, it's somehow to reconcile parking. And what you said, Steve, I echo, is we all want this to be successful. And if we put this in way under park, somebody's going to fail, and somebody's going to suffer on their buildings for years to come. We've faced that fate up and down Monona Drive. We've had this time and time again. By now, we have to have learned our lesson about putting in projects that are under parked, especially when there's no street parking. I know we talked about it last time. City of Madison will hit a lot of standards you're asking for, but they're in downtown residential areas where there's a lot of street parking around there. We're hoping to have street parking on one side of Bridge Road. And that's a different scenario.
Yeah. No, Chris, I understand all your concerns. This is a unique development in that, the city owns a site, and the city has a certain basis in this site. And we're getting pushed from one side of the city to make this even larger and more than it is than we even want to. And we've downscaled this thing numerous times from where CDA even wants this. If CDA had their way, this would be 6, 7, 8-story buildings. Okay? There would be more density. There would be more value. We don't want that. We want this to work. And so we have downscaled this even more than what the other side of City Hall wants to see here. We talk about building B. Originally, we had that as a 160-unit building. We don't think we can do that. This building is going to be more like 135 to 140. We've made the value of building A larger with more commercial and a little more housing so that we can make sure the city gets whole on their current financial investment in this site. And we knew that building B would have to be smaller. So in turn, we had to try to make building A a little bit more valuable, a little bit more commercial, because we knew we weren't going to be able to hit the assessment necessary in building B. So I get from a planning standpoint, you can't make decisions upon whether a site works and parks and functions correctly based upon what the other side of the city hall needs to make sure that they get a hole in the site. But we are battling that, and we're more in your camp than we are on trying to jam as much as we can on this site. I can assure you that, because parking is a really big concern of ours. We talk about building B on Bridge Road. We've moved that back a little bit to make sure that, one time we had that thing right up against Bridge Road. Well, that didn't accommodate the ability to keep that parking on Bridge Road. That parking on Bridge Road is very important to us. Right now, all of the residents are going to be parking under building B. So we're not worried about residents because we have them covered. We are worried about visitors.
You have the residents covered if they only have one car.
There's more than one per unit, but it's not two.
Underground?
We're at like what, 100?
Per resident.
What do we have? 165 stalls,
Yeah, it's like 160 stalls.
and we have 137 units planned in that building.
Is that what we're at, 137? Because I've heard a bunch of numbers.
137 units with 178 covered
Yeah.
stalls.
Okay, but so we're not planning on upping it from the 137 anymore?
As of right now, we're planning to leave it at the 137.
Okay.
That's good news.
Yeah. Yep.
But once again,
We don't have-
there's a
we-
balance there of what we're trying to meet from the other side too.
I get that. We're not CDA though.
No, I know. I'm just,
Yeah, and I get that too. That's why I can't just sit here and say CDA is making us do this, because the reality is we're trying to make sure that what we do here works, and make sure that it works for us, but then also works for CDA and Plan Commission as well. And it is a delicate balance, because you push on one thing and it pulls on something else, and you have to go into this believing is this gonna work the way it is. And so I appreciate all your comments, because it kind of hits home to what is fundamental to our core, and that is, are we going to have parking issues? We get the yacht club is using this other parking. We could carve off half of building B and make it a 40-unit apartment building, and we could build more surface parking where building B is. We would never be able to get a project like that approved at CDA. So we wouldn't even be here if that was an option, right? I mean, CDA would never approve something like that.
I don't know.
I'm just telling you what we're being told from the other side. So we could downsize everything, create more surface parking, but then we don't even get to Plan Commission because it doesn't pass the other side of the city hall. So
It's got, you have to create a certain amount of value.
we do, like I mentioned before, our goal is to get the greatest amount of mixed uses in this project so that the users in this development as a whole share parking. And, you know, we talk about building C. We're at 3 stalls per 1,000. Okay, looking at just straight code, what's it required? Well, that's what's required per code. From a practical standpoint, when this is fully built out, I would like to believe, and we'll set it up our way, but I would like to believe that people that visit the restaurants in Building A or the park on the weekends are going to park in the parking lot of Building C when it's completely empty and those office users aren't using that parking lot. So I would like to believe that we can take advantage of cross-parking abilities and make everything work and not be in a position where we are underparked.
Susan?
Just ask a question for information, because this probably wouldn't work, but on the connector road where there's the parallel parking, how many stalls do you lose when you go to angled parking? I mean,
Right in here,
in the, yeah.
Aaron and I were just talking about it. I think that was a great comment. I think we would push those to angle
You
right away.
could do angle and not lose a space, okay.
Yeah, we might lose a couple. We might lose a couple, but from a safety standpoint, I think it's a very good comment.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be better if it works, but they do, in San Francisco, they have that on the hills. They have perpendicular parking, because otherwise your car will.
Sure.
People drive by it, so it works.
Sure.
I have a question. Why is the parking on the Madison side? People would have to cross the street to come to.
Well, right now it's on both sides.
Right now it's on both.
Oh, okay, it's on both.
It's getting rebuilt. Bridge Road's getting rebuilt in 18.
Right.
So they were proposing just one side.
Who's they?
The city.
Madison.
Which
city?
The issue is that the
Are you
design of
talking-
the road predates this.
Yeah, when we first started laying this road out, it was 2 years ago when some of the first development teams came forward and didn't necessarily need the parking on that side of the road. Instead of changing the curb widths, we could keep the curb widths where they are, the road footprint stays the same, park on one side and include two bike lanes and get rid of one parking lane without really changing the width of the road.
But, okay.
And that was a couple years ago.
So a couple of comments.
Yeah.
As someone earlier said, there's a ton of parking on the Madison side. They don't need it. Okay?
Yeah.
If I'm on a bike, I'm in all likelihood not going to come up Bridge Road. Where am I going to go? If I'm going westbound on Broadway on a bicycle.
Yep.
I don't know why I'd turn right on the Bridge Road. And if the bike path went through so is it possible to do a bike path on the Madison side without doing a bike path on the Monona side?
You almost always need to have two-direction traffic. So we talked about that, potentially. The development team came up with the idea, which was a good idea, I think, of putting a multi-use path on the Madison side. So instead of a sidewalk, it would be a 10-foot path.
Because if you think about it realistically, if you really wanted to go to Monona, you could cut through the development.
The development, yep.
And I can't imagine anybody coming down there wanting to turn right on Bridge and go on a bicycle. It just, logically, it doesn't make sense. Now, if Madison thinks somebody's going to come out of Madison and go on the Beltline on a bicycle, I think they don't know what they're talking about. But if they want it, let them have it. But why do we need it on both sides? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I think the conversation with Madison has to happen again. I don't think it has happened since we've seen this stuff. I think it needs to happen again. The only hang-up on the Madison versus Monona is Madison's paying for their half and Monona's paying for their half. In Madison's standpoint right now, maybe, don't know this, but maybe we don't want to do anything with our half. Our half's fine. So really, Monona only really has real control on their half of the road. So that's where I think there still has to be conversations. I think you're right. And the development team said put a multi-use path on the one side and let Madison have it. Madison was never even going to replace the sidewalk on that side. before, for if we were to reconstruct Ridge Road, they were gonna leave their sidewalk there. So I don't, and there's the retaining wall, there's a wood retaining wall along that whole stretch there with the parking. It's not in real good shape, but again, City of Madison side. So I think there's a conversation that still needs to happen. I think it can be resolved, and I agree, it sounds like tonight, the more parking, the better, so.
Both sides.
I think this has to go, but yeah, right,
Both
both
sides,
sides
for sure.
probably. Yeah.
Bridge Road.
I would, I do see, go up and down, and I do see people parking on the Madison side, even though there is parking, and, so I mean, it's getting used, both sides gets used, so. I mean, maybe the standpoint is we go back to Public Works and we talk to City of Madison, say, hey, we wanna keep parking here, what do you guys think about bikes? What do we need to do with bikes, and put our collective heads back together and figure it out. And I think they can happen pretty fast, considering you guys will probably be bringing a revised GDP back to it.
Josh, before you sit down,
Yes.
with the Bridge Road connector and the bike path on the Madison side, did that include, I know they didn't want to even do the sidewalks in the section that had sidewalks. Was the reconstruction going to put sidewalks in where they're missing the short little stub?
Yes. Yeah, from the cafe down to the corner.
Mhm.
Yeah. What's the crossroad there?
It's
Lake-
Lake Point to,
From Lake Point down, they were gonna put it in on that side to make the connection.
so there is a possibility if they're adding new there, that might be the entry point to have that discussion of a wider multi-use from that point all the way down to the Lake Loop
True.
to serve the Madison part. And the reason why the bike lanes on Broadway makes some sense is in italics and quotes, is because you potentially could connect up if you cover over Southtown Bridge to the paths back by Lake Farm. I've yet to see someone travel that way, but
It's not set up.
You would take the Capital Lake City Trail if you're gonna do that.
Yeah.
yeah. But if you go on the other side, there's bike paths that dead end at the railroad tracks. So. All right. Further questions or concerns, Chris?
One comment, I know I'm in the minority more. I like building C down one parking width because I think we're short of parking in the center of all this where you've got that park or whatever it's going to be. It's going to be a really cool thing. And again, I go to parking, there's so few places to park around there that are available. So for me, it made sense to have that one bay of parking right there. Plus it gave you the opportunity, instead of going all in, to be able to have 60 underground stalls, because you have that parking on top of a ramp and then the parking under the building. So it would get you another 30 stalls on the site, plus you get 30 stalls by the center of this where we want people to come.
Yeah. Keep in mind, that building C is really a placeholder right now until we get a user. I mean, right now it's at 30,000 square
That was
feet.
my thought, though. It was bring it forward a little bit, because we do have a lot more asphalt from Broadway looking than we did before. The Chase building's quite a bit further than your east-west portion of your existing building, so it would cut that down. But for me, a way to get, and if you have any other way, I'd love to hear it, but a way to get more parking towards the center of this development would be nice, because people will drive to use that park, they won't bike.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we don't want to block the front of that building, but again, it's a placeholder. That building, we have the ability to build more parking underground and grow that building to 50,000 square feet. But we're not going to do any of that until we have a user.
Or some success in phase 1 and 2.
We're not going to build office building on spec no matter what, so it'll be dependent on user.
Right. Other feedback for the GDP?
My guess is 75% of the users of that park are not people users.
All of my concerns have already been addressed, so I'm not going to continue to add pile-ons. Sunday, I believe the recommendation was for table this item, given some of the renditions, and then we can move on to the next item. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Further discussion? Hear none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can't discuss it.
I always miss that one. All right, item has been tabled, and we can move on to item 6A, which is public hearing for Request by Galway Companies for approval of a PIP for Phase 1 of the Yahara Commons GDP, including approximately 96 residential units, 28,000 square feet of commercial space, and a 3,000 square foot building and a public park. Sonny, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I don't know how much presentation the applicants prepared on it, but just a brief overview of what's in the staff report. I didn't spend a lot of time reviewing things like parking and green space because all of those things are going to change. So maybe we should start with the applicants just giving a little bit more detailed overview of the important points on Building A.
Sure.
Well, the team is the same as the GDP, and we've already touched on a lot of the bigger picture issues around parking, site placement, and so forth. So I'm going to kind of zoom past what we've been looking at. We have a series of drawings included in the submittal from the civil engineers. I know existing conditions, demolition plan, site plan, grading and drainage, or grading and erosion, utility, and here's a close-up of the preliminary landscape plan for this area. I think that's probably the first thing that makes sense to talk about. Does anyone have any points that they want us to discuss regarding? Sorry. All right. Well, with that said, Jeff, you're still here. You want to talk a little bit about this part of it? Is it similar to what we already reviewed?
Yes. That's what I presented.
Okay. Lower level parking. So on this level, we are on the plaza side. These spaces are at grade with the plaza. So this space on the corner is intended to be run by a restaurant and a special events type of space that can open up and have potentially additional outdoor seating, spilling out to here and really feel like part of the plaza. I don't know what that is. Freaking blue line, I can't get rid of it. This is the park building, or multi-purpose room for the City of Monona Parks, and the two public restrooms with entry accessible from the park side and pass through to some indoor parking. So in this lower level garage, there's an anticipated overhead door that separates this back portion. That would be card reader access, and public would have access to share some of this additional parking here. Elevator core to go up. So outside the door here, you've got steps lead up through a carve out in the building between the two legs of the A building. Elevator access for the public is a shared elevator with the private residential. It's a two-sided, so on the residential side you have two elevators through a private access lobby. On the public side, when that's called, it locks out the other side and vice versa. So you can use the dual sides for security for the residential. Other spaces you're seeing down here, you've got a collection point for 3 to 4 yard dumpsters, which would be picked up from the city. You've got trash chutes from the residential that comes down in the middle here. There's a trash chute that comes down to a private room here for the cafe. Same thing here, the restaurant has their own chute that comes down, so that employees of these establishments will be responsible to ferry the dumpsters over to the common collection space. The city is just picking up from one location on the outside wall. Other spaces down here, fitness room adjacent to the south stair here. Again, this would not be public access. You would get to it from via card reader and from the south stair. So if you need to take an elevator, you're kind of coming through the garage to get to it. But additional storage units are placed throughout where we could get them. On the first floor, this is at the Broadway level. Surface lot, cafe. This is on the west corner of the building with access to a private outdoor dining area. We have another drawing that does bring a ramp in here for access down, dealing with those grading issues. It's one of the things that we need to pull together. but acknowledging that we do need to get pedestrian access down here because it's kind of a steep transition. An office space that fronts onto the plaza level or plaza side with a little terrace that overlooks it. Retail space with frontage on Broadway side, and then you have a residential entry, mail, and a club room that's likely, we're looking at ways that that can be shared with the office, get some efficiency of space. This large corner on the northeast, is intended for a restaurant user with outdoor terrace, and this access along the riverside is for secondary means of egress for these spaces. So, once you get over 1,500 square feet on these commercial spaces, you have to have 2 ways out, a narrow slot. You got to go both sides because they're too close together. And then the last space, we're anticipating a restaurant or commercial user on the southern end of the building of the first floor. The upper floors are repetitive. We can talk about the unit mix with the matrix, but as you can see, 2-bedroom units typically are at your ends and at the knuckle of the building. 1-bedroom and studio units, there's a couple that might be 1-bedroom plus den. And that's 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor. 5th floor steps back at the ends, and there could potentially be an outdoor space there depending on how the numbers shake out. But this is your east elevation facing the river. So what we've done with the two, and if the boards are a little bit more clear if you want to get up and look at them at the end. Primary material palette is like Cream City brick holding the base of the building, and we're bringing it up to the 4th floor level and a vertical expression that returns on the balcony side of things to help create this rhythm along the building and break down the scale and proportion of the building. The gray color, which looks darker when you have shadows on, but it's a gray fiber cement panel. Some of it will be panelized with trim pieces. Some of it will be lap siding style. So the lap siding is what you would see at the back of the balconies, the way it's designed. Blue is intended to be a metal panel. Again, that could also be a fiber cement depending on how things work. There's a lot of options with how you can detail and color that these days. The wood grain color, again, the soffits would likely be fiber cement. Balconies are going to be constructed with wood. They may have a fascia panel on them to help pull all that color together. This is on the north elevation facing the plaza. Lower level, you've got this event space with some potentially some overhead doors that could roll up to help blur that line of inside to out. If you can see my cursor still, those are the stairs leading up to the surface lot on the Broadway side. Monona Park building, there's your access point for the public restrooms. And then you've got roof terrace over here for the cafe. From the south on Broadway side, of course, the portion of the building closest to you is a commercial user. We've been talking about it as a restaurant with some outdoor seating and some landscaping that Jeff addressed earlier. You can see that the residential portion does step back a little bit from Broadway, as on the first level, and then of course up here it also steps back, similar to this side. Signage opportunity, vertical signage for that corner restaurant could be here. Of course, you've got directly more typical signage location possibilities directly over entrances on the end retail. So the same thing would happen with this masonry base, is that signage would occur above the storefront entries. In the west, again, this is same material palette. We try to keep things very simple. With these large-scale multifamily buildings, there's the approach, I think, for this was to try to simplify in terms of colors and textures and not get too complicated because of the amount of ins and outs that you inherently have with these projects. I think that the aesthetic worked out a lot better heading down this path than adding more materials and colors to the scheme. I thought that made it a bit more too busy. So it's a fairly straightforward material palette and fairly straightforward in terms of constructability and how things are detailed, so keep things very clean. Some perspectives that you've seen, of course, from across the river, from the B building green roof. So this is from someone's balcony looking over that to the plaza. And then from some imagination spot up in the air, floating over here. But you get a sense of how that works with the C building and how things are looking from that side. So that's all the additional imagery that we brought for PIP level. We just wanted to get some discussion going about the architecture and talk a little more about what feedback would be on a PIP level. You guys have anything to add?
All right, we can move on from 6A, the public hearing section, move on to 6B, which is the pre-hearing conference. Requested by Galway Companies for the approval of PIP for Phase 1 of the Ohio Commons GDP, including approximately 96 residential units, 28,000 square feet of commercial space, 3,000 square feet of parks in the building, and a public park. Sonny?
I don't have a lot to add. If the Plan Commission has any major revisions that they'd like to see, it's a good time to give the applicants that feedback so it can be incorporated into the revised plans. But again, we don't have a lot of detail to go from on parking, stormwater, and green space and landscaping, which are some main points that I'll be reviewing in the next submittal.
All right, we'll start down at this end. Chris?
Okay. Starters, I love the mix you got in the commercial area. I hope it can end up being that nice. I know it seldom ends up how you plan it, but boy, if you could, that'd be a terrific start to this whole thing. I like the way it lays out. I like the mix of it. I like everything about it. A question, you're showing us the lower level, the public parking. What public do you anticipate parking down there?
As far as for the park.
For anybody, it's public parking for that front, whatever.
Yeah, this is, it's actually.
What public will use it? Would it be like the?
Yeah, this is actually private parking for our development.
Okay, but so a restaurant user could come in and use that, or your business owners that might rent out a spot would use it. You would anticipate the people that are frequenting that business, the commercial space, is probably to park up on your surface lot, or?
Yeah, and if that's where there'd be access to public people using.
Understood.
I think it's a mix, actually, because if you, this restaurant user, the way that we're currently contemplating laying this out.
Is that where that blue line wanted to be all along? Is that where you put your walls in?
No. This restaurant user is going to, that's on the corner, is taking this both lower level and the upper level. There'll be a stairwell inside the space.
So they could.
So there will be parking. We're going to encourage the commercial users to use the lower level as much as possible.
Okay.
And, there's this common stairwell up right here. If you park down below, you walk through here and walk right up the stairs to that main plaza level. It's very convenient.
So if somebody wants to use that plaza, they're just coming to be there, they can park down here?
If they're, no, I'm sorry, to use the main, the parking on the main level.
Right.
You come in through here and there's a stairwell coming up.
But the stairwell goes to the plaza or park?
The first floor. The first floor retail.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I do. I was just curious what happens when somebody wants to go to the park and they park down there.
Well, if it's an issue, we will begin to monitor the park. Our first priority is to make sure that our commercial users have parking. And if there's an issue where people are going to the park and our commercial users don't have parking, then we'll have to monitor it.
Or they get ice cream cone from your restaurant and then go over to the park.
And that's not an issue.
That's a hard one.
That's not an issue, then.
No, it's a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that we've been talking about it with our restaurant user is to monitor it. If it's an issue, we may have to gate this and validate it with people that are visiting the businesses. And as of right now, we're not looking at the parking as a revenue generator. It's for our businesses.
Yeah, you need it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I like the idea you've got the trash chutes down there for the pickup, but then you said the city picks it up. Does the city pick up your trash, or you have a private?
No, we'll have private trash pickup.
That's what I thought. I just heard the city a number of times, I thought, really? That's new policy.
No, I already.
Oh.
We don't do that.
Were you offering?
Yeah.
No, I just, I heard what?
It's gonna be a heavier truck.
40 ton. Sorry. Okay. For me, and it goes contrary to what you just said about the architecture, for my building, it's all about curb appeal, right? And for example, when I look at that west elevation, to me, it might be a little bit plain. I see just a lot of gray. I don't see a lot of details. I don't see any variations. Again, it's your building. But for me, a building that big has an area to be able to change some textures and some colors and things depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But when people come up and say, I want to live there, I don't want to live there, it's all about what they see. And Aaron, you know that. It's when they drive by, say, that's a place I want to live. You've lost them or sold them lots of times before they ever get in to see the unit.
And I agree with you. I think the one thing that's really hard to visualize on, elevations or drawings like this is with colors. You by having lap siding and next to it having, panels with Tamlin trim that has a totally different look, same color, but it has a totally different texture, and that we have that. It's just hard to visualize that here.
And it's hard to see when it's a straight-on elevation.
Yep.
Perspectives are easier, but it's just a caution I have, because when I look at the west elevation, the way it's drawn and what I can see in 2D, it looks plain.
I think part of the challenge and where we're headed architecturally, and I think Adam has done a really good job of capturing this, is we want this to be modern, but I think a lot of the stuff that's happening right now isn't timeless, right? I feel like it's,
Exactly.
And we want our buildings to be timeless because we're looking at having owned in this for a long time. So, I mean, I think that these guys have done a great job, and we built a lot of these apartment buildings. I think this feels good.
Good.
It's got some aspects that are a little different too.
Again, north elevation, I'm sure you got something there. When I look at it, it just looks, it looks very great. And so you have an idea in mind, I know you do, and it's maybe not translating on that page real well, so.
I think sorry to cut you off there.
Go ahead.
One other side of it, I think that really helps is these big overhangs that are hard to visualize here with the soffit overhangs. Typically, you would have maybe just a parapet, or you'd have, I think that those soffit overhangs, and Adam's really been pushing back because I'm looking at the cost of them, right? But I think they do add another whole element that gives it a, some shadowing and stuff that really helps.
Another thing that I think is really difficult to communicate with buildings of this scale is you want to take a view where you see enough of it so that there's not a gazillion pictures. We put a lot of images together for you guys, but the experience of them is at a much lower and shorter window frame. So when you're down on the ground in front of it, you really feel the ins and outs that are there, and those shadows translate to they feel like different textures, and they get a lot of character just from slight material changes and difference in plane, and the shadows work with it. So
At the ground level, I'm fine with it. You got a lot of brick masonry, and that's the time to select. Just the people driving by it are looking at it. And if I can, I'm going to go back to your GDP just for a second. My kudos to whoever builds your models. My God, they put hours in. All those models you click through, good Lord, that must be a great program or somebody with a lot of patience.
I stay up late a lot.
Okay, you just made me think of that when you started talking about modeling different things. And then my same comment on landscape would be intensify it. Thanks.
Kathy?
Well, to me, it is amazing. I look at the total of the project and I say, wow, it's hard to believe this is all going to happen down on that triangle, which I've been going by for more years than I care to think about. I just have one, and it's just more out of curiosity than anything, and it's my aesthetic eye. And I look at your drawings, and I like the buildings for the most part, but I look and I see this pop of blue, it looks like, coming out of nowhere that doesn't seem to relate to anything. Is there a reason
Sure.
architecturally to do that?
If I can go to a larger plan, it's actually, I mean, this, so it's used as a way to, if it's a very strong visual break between corner and, I'll say field. So on a building like this, you really want to turn your corners with an architectural expression, and that becomes one thing. So the blue happens, at corners, balconies, but it's not as in your face as the vertical elements that are out and signifying different other elements of the building program. So the blue is directly over the passage from below. So where you walk from the plaza level up to the parking, we're using it on the other buildings as accent colors too. So the development as a whole will have
so there's-
splashes of this
okay.
blue all the way around to help the context of the whole space feel like
So I'm just saying this
cohesive.
because I'm just saying the one that it looks like it's isolated.
Right. The intent was use a bold color to tie the whole thing together, but not have so much of it that it dominates.
Thanks for the explanation.
Sure.
In general, I really like the architecture. I think it's great. I love the splash of blue. I think it can tie into a lot of other elements as you go forward. If there's banner arms, on-site wayfinding, ties in with the Monona logo, even. So the choice of blue, I'm a fan of. The landscape, I would agree, intensify it. I like the idea of all the use of a lot of natives. I think that's great. So you have sedum mats on there. I personally think that's a bad idea, especially on the edge of a parking lot. And plus, there's so little green space that you want a little verticality in there, and they're beautiful, but they're better served, I think, on rooftop gardens and things. Also, in regards to the landscape, seeing a little more, you talk about having a dynamic landscape, if there's going to be any sort of accents with boulders or bollard lighting or any sort of elements like that, it would be a great thing to kind of tie down from the architecture itself and bring it into the landscape and a hardscape element as well. That's all I have for now.
All right. Susan?
I don't really have anything to add. I was pleased with the architecture too, because I was worried about that. Seeing a lot of buildings go up around town with what I think looks like a hodgepodge of color and isn't timeless. I like that you use that word, because I think this is a step in the right direction that way. So I liked it, and I don't have anything to add to what has already been said. I think it looks good.
I like the architecture too. I like the vertical elements. I like the overhangs. I like the blue accent. I think you did a good job of breaking up the mass.
The only concern I had with the architecture, and I don't know if concern's right, so there was a mention about the number of materials and simplifying, and I think the brick was an excellent foundation, and the vertical elements with the how they tie back into the building for those returns do add to that timeless. I think we could take the same image and plop it just about anywhere, though. And so I'm wondering what's unique about this architecture and how it ties to the relationship to where it's at. So with the lap siding for the returns where the balconies are, really makes sense in the palette, the color palette in relation to other areas around our water. Makes sense when we get to the fiber cement panels that are out front. It seems to lose and wash out. So something to consider. What's unique about how this is put together in relationship to the site? It's a beautiful building, don't get me wrong. It just picked up when I heard simplify materials, which I think you did a nice job of simplifying color, using the accent the right way. I love the tie-in of the blue as a whole site. I think it works well. And the wood with the overhangs at the top, I think are going to be a hit.
They're in.
Great.
All right. Anything that we didn't cover that you were hoping we would?
I don't think so.
Didn't give you enough? No.
We really, we genuinely appreciate all the comments. Some of the stuff we've thought about, some of it we haven't, and, we realize you guys want this to be a great project too, so we'll try to incorporate them as many of them as we can.
I think that like the sustainability and, just low maintenance is obviously, we gotta, pay to take care of those things. So that's objective one, right? I mean, we don't want something that looks a lot different in 5 years. We want it to look the same, right? So I think that that's obviously one of our big focuses. And I think we've definitely accomplished that with the materials we have. We've got some good ideas on what to do for that wood look, and yeah.
Just wanted to point out one other area. On the Broadway side of the building with the retail spaces, I think you had a pretty wide sidewalk area in front of the storefronts.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was? It was like 10 or 12 feet?
Not exactly.
Not
I'd
that
say
wide?
you're in the ballpark, though.
Okay. What's your vision for that? It's not something that we have anywhere else in Monona. Could be really great.
I think that the idea was to just make sure it was a very comfortable walking path, but we were also, when we established that line, we're envisioning some planter boxes, to bring more green directly adjacent to the storefront. And you see some of that on the site plan. It's not totally resolved yet. We've got to get Jeff involved, and conceptually that's why it was there.
Chris?
I would just say, I love it for retail. I think it's the way to go, and I'm sure that's why you did it. For retail, you want people to be comfortable out there. There might be what you're thinking about, displays might come out during the day and go back in, but to have the area to put a little planter box, or they might even want to put a couple tables out on that site or something during the day, I think it's a great way to build retail, to have a little extra room there in front. You don't feel so tight.
Absolutely.
I agree.
All right. Any
Great.
last feedback? All right, and that was for the pre-hearing, so we can close the pre-hearing section, and we can move on to item 7A.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Wonderful job. And 7A, staff report regarding the status of development project proposals.
I did receive plans today for the new 100-foot communications tower out behind Walmart. So I believe those are on the website. They are under development plans, if you want to take a look. And that's all I have to report.
All right. 7B, request for information regarding or information concerning development projects. All right. Hearing none. Item 8. I need a motion for adjournment.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you guys very much.